Hi there, my name is Rodney Smith, and I used to have a semi-regular series called Watch It Played's Table Talk, but it's been gone for a long time. But it's back, this is it, it's here and it's happening again with your help. Because the way this series works is I will initially share my thoughts on a gaming-related topic, and then invite your responses through the YouTube comments, which I'll then compile into a following episode called Table Talk Back. And in this way, we can all participate in the conversation. We can hear different perspectives, different ideas, and hopefully learn something new, or maybe even be entertained along the way. But there's going to be a couple of changes with this new version of the show. First of all, it's currently being hosted on Board Game Geek's YouTube channel. Now, some of you might not realize this, but earlier this year in 2018, we joined forces with Board Game Geek. Now, we're still creating our own content on the Watch It Played channel, but from time to time, I'm also going to be creating content for Board Game Geek, and I thought this would be a great show to migrate over here. The other change is related to the way we used to do our Table Talk Back episodes, where in addition to your comments, I would also invite people to send in video submissions, and those were a lot of fun to have. But they exponentially increased the workload in creating those episodes. And I'd like to try to get this back to a mostly regular show again. And I think cutting that part out will allow us to do it without removing too much of the discussion. But I would like to have a special guest on every Table Talk episode, which I'll then just pick out. So we'll just have one person create a video contribution along with all of your comments that you'll be sending in as well. And I'm very excited to say that our first contribution will come from Christian Kang of Take Your Chit. So he's going to be recording a video submission to respond to this episode that will air in the follow-up episode. So Christian, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this topic. And what is this topic? Well, that's a good question. See, you're already helping, so let's get right to it. The idea for this topic has been just kicking around in my head ever since I played The Reckoners. Now, this is a cooperative game, and at the beginning it presents you with the option to choose your difficulty level. Now, what I want you to do is just pretend you're back at your game group, and somehow I've shown up there, and you're there with 4 of your friends, and I'm going to say to you, all right, everybody, we have to pick our difficulty level, and the options are beginner, standard, hard, and Sparks. Now, what do you think you and your friends would be most inclined to say? Aside from like, what the heck is Sparks? Sparks is just kind of like the ultra hard mode. So we got beginner, standard hard, and extra hard. What do you think you and your friends would pick? Now, I don't think there's actually a universal answer to this question, but in my experience, I have found that the gamers at the table, the seasoned gamers, they will shy away, almost be dismissive of the idea of starting on the beginner level. So the first part of this topic really is that question. What would have been your response to the question? Would you have gone with beginner level? Would that have been fine with you? Or would you said, well, I think we can start at normal? Or are you maybe a little more ambitious and would have said, no, let's go straight to hard. We want a challenge. Well, here's the thing. In my experience, anyway, cooperative games typically, I would say, good ones, however you want to evaluate that, pose a challenge. That's the point of them, that you're not necessarily going to win your first game, that there's a reason to come back and play it again and again and get better so that you can beat the game and feel like you've accomplished something. If it was just a cakewalk to victory, then I don't know, there's not as much satisfaction in a cooperative game for me if that's the case. And sometimes I think we underestimate how challenging a first play of a game can be. And so when players say, no, I don't want to play beginner level, let's go straight to normal, and then the game kicks their butt, I think there's almost a human nature instinct to say, oh, this game's not balanced well. It's too challenging. People don't go, well, maybe my strategies weren't very good. Maybe I played poorly. Or maybe we picked a difficulty level that was too high for us. I think although with some afterthought, we might come to that conclusion. Our initial reactions, I think, as humans tend to be a little more defensive of our egos, if you know what I'm saying. Now, I don't put all of the blame on us gamers and our potentially fragile egos or whatever the case may be. I think sometimes the games do themselves a disservice when they have titles for their levels like beginner and standard and hard and so on. Now, I don't know how your fictional group would have responded to the initial scenario, but just imagine again we go back to that same situation, and instead the game presents it as, would you like to play at level 1, 2, 3, or 4? Same exact rules, just a relabeling of things. My instinctive reaction is that people would think, okay, level 1, like chapter 1 of a book, that's where we start. Or level 1 in a video game, that's where you start. And then you progress. You do level 1, then you do level 2, you do level 3, and you level 4. I just wonder if that labeling doesn't potentially remove some of the stigma that's attached to the word beginner. Now, for me personally, I prefer to start, especially with a new group, on the beginner or level 1 when playing the Reckoners. And then I like to see it as a challenge after that. Okay, we beat level 1, maybe it was a bit of a cakewalk. Cool. Now, let's challenge ourselves. Let's go to level 2. Let's go to standard. I also like it because it gives people a chance to kind of get their feet wet, get familiar with the rules before they're also struggling with the added tension and challenge of the game kind of beating you up. Now, like I said earlier, I think a good cooperative game does present a challenge, but I don't think it's wrong to allow that challenge to ramp up slowly as opposed to sort of just hit you like a brick wall. Now, there's also another element to this as well. Some games have a basic set of rules and then like 2 or 3 pages at the end, which they might call like the advanced rules of the game. Now, this is another question. How do you typically play those games? Do you always start with all the rules thrown in? Or do you prefer to start with the basic rules, and then once everyone kind of understands those, then introduce the advanced rules later? I will say that personally, I do tend to just play the vanilla basic rules every time, the first time I play a game. Even if I've read the advanced rules, and I'm like, well, those don't seem like too much more. I will typically always play the basic game first. There's a couple of reasons for that, and maybe I'll dive into that a little more in the follow-up episode as we sort of expand this topic. But this is where I want to turn things over to you. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on all of this, because these thoughts have been kicking around in my brain, like I said, for a few weeks now. And I don't know if I'm really correct in saying that, level 1, 2, 3, 4 might remove some of the stigma around ideas like beginner, hard, advanced. Maybe some of you just think people need to get over these terms and not worry about them, drop their ego, and just sort of embrace what beginner means. Hey, you're a beginner. You've never played this game before. I'm just really curious to hear what you think. I'm also curious to, again, hear what your response would have been to the proposition of, do you want to play on beginner or standard level? I'd like to know, when you play games that have a basic and maybe advanced mode, do you throw those together? Do you have thoughts and ideas around what should be done? What has worked well for your game group? Or maybe what's gone horribly wrong? I love hearing stories on both sides of this. Are there games where you think absolutely you must skip the basic or standard or beginner level of the rules to really get that full experience of the game? That in fact, the beginner level is sacrificing some of the fun and enjoyment that you'd really get out of the game, even as first-time players. In the comments below, please leave your suggestions and thoughts about that. And then in the follow-up episode, I'm going to compile those questions in with my own responses to some of those thoughts, along with our friend Christian Kang, who's also going to provide his own video response to these ideas. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.